1987, Tom Petty called up Heartbreakers guitarist Mike Campbell to let him know the band was done, saying, "I've had enough of this whole scene." Mike listened, stunned. A little while later, Tom calls him back and apologizes, dismissing the earlier conversation, saying he was just in a mood. But there was more to this than just a mood. Tom was feeling trapped on many levels, and he didn't know how to cope with it. He would come to understand it more by the time he records Wildflowers in 1994. He describes in the Petty biography discussing the song with someone who tells him the song is about him. "It kind of knocked me back, but he was right. It was me singing to me." The events leading up to this realization will have lasting consequences for Tom Petty on a professional and personal level. His loyal band, as well as everyone else close to him, will be less than thrilled with some of the changes that follow. They were like family on a long journey that for some started off in Gainesville, Florida in the 1960s, when they were just teenagers trying to get their foot in the door of rock and roll. While playing in multiple groups, Petty witnesses other local musicians, Stephen Stills, Don Felder, and Bernie Leadon, leave for California, where they soon find their place among Laurel Canyon legends. At a nearby Battle of the Bands, one group that stands out, the Allman Joys, will soon find huge success as the Allman Brothers Band. Petty keeps his eye on the prize the entire time. When his band Mudcrutch finally takes a leap of faith and heads west to Los Angeles, following in the others who found success footsteps, he makes one last move before leaving, marrying his girlfriend Jane, partly at his Christian mother's urging. They leave behind Florida's swamps during the height of the oil embargo, when cars crawled in endless lines just for a few gallons of gas, enough to make it to the next stop.
This time the trip was really hard because we had Ben Munt's mother's station wagon. It did at tops about 50 miles an hour,
They put their dogs and gear in the truck and head out when the truck breaks down at the Gainesville city limits. Once they get the truck repaired, they head out again, only to discover the bearings are out on the station wagon, leaving them stranded for days waiting on the parts to arrive. It may have been an ominous warning of the troubles they would face, but they never wavered. Out west, California shimmered like a mirage. One coast felt like survival, the other like possibility. Petty refers to it as the greatest trip of my life.
Very bizarre.
Once in Los Angeles, Tom goes into a phone booth to look up record companies' addresses to ask for meetings to have their demos heard. By chance, he looks down and sees a folded piece of paper by his foot and opens it to discover 25 record company addresses and phone numbers written down. Someone else must have had the same idea. The competition to land a contract would become very real. However, it didn't take long before multiple offers came in. After landing a deal with Shelter Records from English producer Denny Cordell, who had produced the Moody Blues, along with co-owner Leon Russell, they pack up whatever they need from Florida and move out to California with just enough money to get them back there. Cordell believes they are the next Rolling Stones, and soon they are recording their first album, but things don't unfold as expected. After the first attempt failed to chart, Mudcrutch is dropped from the label except Tom, who convinces them to keep Mike on too while they work on developing. Over time, one by one, the members of Mudcrutch drift back to Florida, everyone except Tom. He even sends his wife and new baby back to stay with family. Determined, Petty stays at a motel right across the street from Shelter Records. He spends nearly all his time there, becoming friends with the staff and immersing himself in the scene. At one point, he's asked to house sit for Leon Russell, despite not having met him yet. When Leon finally hears Mudcrutch's demo song, Lost in Your Eyes, he calls Tom and invites him to write some songs. The two hit it off and a new chapter begins. Through Leon, Tom is introduced to major figures in the music world, Brian Wilson, George Harrison, and others who seem larger than life. Petty describes himself as awestruck. Leon's place is a hub for LA music industry insiders. One of them is Bird's manager Terry Melcher, who tells Petty the chilling story of how Charles Manson's followers targeted a house he once rented. It is believed that Melcher was the intended target that night, a story that leaves an impression on the young Petty. He attends recording sessions with legends, watching them record, trying to soak up everything he could. He says, "Cautionary tales were in every other room I passed through." Although impressed with the music insiders he is meeting, Tom realizes he has no intention of spending his time hanging out and talking and partying his days away. He gets to work and reassembles his band, now renamed to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. He says of the moment, "It was Christmas 1975 and I knew I wasn't fooling around anymore." His wife Jane stays by his side the entire time with their first child. The band are often hanging out in Petty's home, while some have babies crawling around. They are living more like a close Southern family with long hair, t-shirts, jeans, and hippie vibes while working on their first album. At this point, they are splitting the small amount of money they earn evenly. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers in 1976 record their self-titled debut album, which initially fared poorly in the US. On their first tour, they open for bands such as Kiss, whose die-hard fan base seem uninterested. Undeterred, they agree to a European tour. By the time they arrive, their album has received positive reaction, and they are feeling like finally we are receiving some long-awaited recognition. They appear on Top of the Pops and get the cover of Melody Maker. However, when they return to the US, it's still crickets until their label decides to push them once more. They enlist a DJ at a popular radio station in LA to listen to the album. He attends their concert at the Whiskey and goes backstage to introduce himself and let them know he is going to break them into the market by playing Breakdown the following week, which will literally take their career to another level. When Petty says to his roadie, "Escort these children out of here," clearly failing to understand the gravity of the situation, before long Tom would have his manager call the DJ to apologize. The record soon takes off, and they get a positive review from a couple of high readership publications in San Francisco and LA, which feed the momentum. Week by week, Breakdown starts to climb the charts until it makes it to the top 40. But they are still strapped for cash, even though they have a huge hit record. Tom is driving his old Opel GT that had headlights that flip up and gas fumes that are so bad he has to drive with the windows down and his head sticking out to breathe. He barely has enough money to buy any furniture for his house. During this period, they are opening for acts like Rush when they are scheduled to play at the Fox Theater in Atlanta, in between Blondie and the Kinks. When they go to set up their amps, they see the Kinks' amps are leaving no room for theirs. Ray Davies sat at the piano playing Tired of Waiting for You over and over. Even though it was time for the Heartbreakers sound check, Tom got so frustrated that he said, "We're not playing," and had his crew start taking their amps down. The Kinks' drummer Mick Avery entered from backstage and saw what was going on and offered to push back his drum's riser to make more room for them. Ray got up from the piano and punched Mick in the face. A full fist fight ensues as Petty and the band watched in disbelief. The fight moved all the way out the loading door. A little while later, someone comes in and says, "It's fine, go ahead and move the gear back." They were getting fed up being opening acts and dealing with these chaotic issues on a regular basis. Elliot Roberts sits Tom down and tells him he needs to make some business changes, which includes becoming the front man with frontman pay. That means they will change the way the money is split, with Tom taking the lion's share. He left Roberts to deliver the news to the band. It went over like a lead balloon, as you can imagine. Some never fully got over it. They were all still struggling to make ends meet. Now they would be getting a pay cut. Drummer Stan Lynch said, "I was broke off my ass driving a Ford Granada. I'm living in a shithole, but I have a gold record on my wall. 5-way split." Of what? Elliot Roberts believes Tom was doing most of the work outside of the studio, working every day and making all the hard decisions while the rest of the band were off doing their own thing. But either way, the resentment lingered for years.
You guys all came from Miami. Why the move to L.A.?
No, we didn't come from Miami.
Well, around that area, didn't you?
No, we came from Florida, from the northern part, which is more the redneck part, the gator part, the swamp part. You know, Miami's like New York on the beach. That isn't really Florida to me.
So why the move to L.A.?
Why not? I mean, what are you gonna do in Miami? No, just kidding. There was nowhere to record in Florida.
How tough was it for you once you got to LA to, break into the scene there?
Well, it wasn't tough to break into the scene. It was tough to get something out of it. I think we got a record deal real fast, in about a week, I think.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah, but then it took me 2 years in
that?
court to get out of it, but I got into it in a few days.
After struggling for some time, Dimitriades and producer Jimmy Iovine, who would later go on to form Interscope Records and Beats Music, brings to light that they have a bad contract. They have unknowingly handed over the publishing rights to Shelter. They devise a plot to file for bankruptcy to get them out of the contract and free to sign a new favorable deal with Backstreet Records, which would mean suing his longtime collaborator, Denny Cordell. The lawsuit makes it to trial, and in the end, Shelter settles, releasing them from the contract. Hostilities within the band, especially between drummer Stan Lynch and Petty, begin to spill over into the studio. Tom becomes somewhat reclusive, keeping most everyone at arm's length. Jackson Browne described him, "I mean, we're friends, but I still can't say I know him well." Bassist Tony Blair is fired, and Howie Epstein is brought in as his replacement. The pressures of keeping the band together while pushing to produce more hits, along with signs of marital stress, begin to take its toll. He admits to becoming angry at little things, taking out the worst of his aggression on his manager, Tony Dimitriades. He describes himself as an emotional recluse. When Tom's mother dies, he can't bring himself to attend her funeral due to all the chaos that would ensue in Florida. With another child arriving, he starts to find himself questioning his commitment to his strained marriage, wondering if he was too young to have gotten married in the first place. While making the album Long After Dark, Tom catches wind that his producer Jimmy Iovine is producing Bob Seger, stating, "It is on that record I felt he betrayed me. He failed to mention he was working on a Bob Seger album. The way I see it, I'm a full-time job." However, the audience never knew and fell head over heels for songs like You Got Lucky.
You better watch what you say. You better watch what you do to me. Don't get carried away.
Tensions in the band are becoming a regular occurrence when an Englishman arrives on the scene just in time to lighten the mood. Dave Stewart of the Eurythmics calls Tom to join him, Stevie Nicks and Jimmy Iovine, to work on this song for Stevie. Tom heads over and Stevie has to leave for the day and says she will return the following day to finish the song. When she returns the following afternoon, the song is written with Tom singing the song. They give it to her, and after she listens, she decides it sounded more like a Tom Petty song, not a Stevie Nicks song. She says, "I got up, thanked Dave, thanked Tom, and fired Jimmy." That went down in about 5 minutes. The song wasn't Southern rock. It wasn't Heartland rock. It had British synth pop meets psychedelia all over it. It would open Tom Petty up to a new avenue, right in the midst of his tribute album to his Southern roots, Southern accents. The Heartbreakers were suspicious of this new guy Tom was working with and felt somewhat betrayed that he strayed from their normal routine and didn't include them. Meanwhile, Tom and Dave hit it off and became close friends, even getting matching cowboy hats and rhinestone-embellished suits. When they brought the band into the fold to record the song at Petty's Encino home, Dave eventually won over the band. Don't Come Around Here No More would become one of the band's most loved songs and one of the most iconic videos of all time.
Don't come around here no more. Don't come around here no more.
By this time, Mike Campbell is more than the guitarist. He is also co-writing songs, and his demos are piling up. He typically records the songs on tape, and Tom listens and decides if any are worth developing, which is what happened one day in 1985 when Tom dismissed a song Mike showed him. That same day, Tom got upset about something and punched a wall, breaking his hand. Iovine took the song to Don Henley. Don liked the song and immediately got to work on it. One day, Tom and Mike are out in his car listening to a mix when they turn on the radio and hear the song Tom dismissed. Mike describes the moment. "I turn on the car, the radio comes on, and it's Boys of Summer. The DJ is going on about how it's the best song. Tom just sat there. You could tell he was bothered. Tom says to me, 'You did really good on that. I wished I had had the presence of mind not to let that song get away. Mike says it helped his confidence, noting, "I was glad he didn't go and break his other hand."
My baseball career is over, I think, but I can play guitar again.
Are you learning to control your temper now?
Very much so, yes. Yeah. I haven't hit a reporter in weeks.
When Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers were invited by Bob Dylan to join his tour as his backing band, Tom didn't want to miss the opportunity to learn from one of his early heroes. But Tom was worried about his wife not coming along when Stevie Nicks offered to take her place. Stevie says she tried to talk his wife into going, but Jane said Tom was capable of doing a tour on his own. While on the tour, Tom and Stevie are spending a lot of time together, and he says people assume they are a couple, which they both deny. He says, "Well, we were close. We were never what you'd call an item, but we had our moments." On the tour, they get into a heated argument when they are talking about Fleetwood Mac, and Tom says to her, "Yeah, but Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers are a rock and roll band." They argue about what a real rock band is, and she is extremely insulted. At this point, Tom is holding on to his rigid idealism of what pure rock is supposed to be. It will be another concept that will soon be tested once again by yet another Englishman. Back home in Encino, someone set fire to Tom's family home in an act of arson. They all escape with just a few things they could grab while they watch the house burn to the ground with everything inside. Tom takes his entire family on the road with him on his next tour. By the time Let Me Up, I've Had Enough was released in 1987, the Heartbreakers were feeling worn down. The album was uneven and it showed signs of creative fatigue. The band had started to drift stylistically and personally. Tom continues to find himself at odds with his drummer Stan Lynch on a regular basis. His marriage is on the rocks, and he has now released an album that fails to live up to his and the label's expectation when he becomes close friends with George Harrison. Tom says of their relationship, "My friendship with the band was a different kind of friendship, and it was frayed. I'd become very lonely. George came along, and we just got so close. It was like we had known each other in some other life or something." That's around the time Tom calls Mike to tell him he had enough and thinks it's time to end the band. Mike says he was heartbroken until Tom called him back to say he was just in a mood. In 1986, when Tom heard George Harrison's album Cloud 9, he was floored and wanted Jeff Lynne to produce his next single. Jeff and Tom were messing around on a keyboard at Tom's house when Tom starts joking around about some lyrics trying to make Jeff laugh. While Tom is strumming and singing, Jeff says "Free Fallin'" and Tom runs with it. Petty says, "It was so light, so removed from the struggle. I hadn't felt that in some time." The song came together quickly, and in contrast to Tom's meticulous time spent on a song, Jeff moved very fast. They called Mike Campbell up and went to his bedroom studio and recorded what would end up being the single for Tom's first solo album. They began building new tracks quickly. Jeff was a breath of fresh air to the frustrations he was feeling in the studio with his band, often annoyed but with too much baggage to know how to approach the subject without hurt feelings. Jeff says of his process, "I guess I was showing Tom and Mike a way of making records that wasn't just about laboring over the same thing all day. By the time you're recording, you've already put a lot of thought into it." Tom says of Jeff's method, "I was just watching him do it, watching how he went about things. I found it fascinating. I was learning things I always wanted to learn, but no one had really ever taught me. This really talented guy was showing us a whole different way of working." While some of the Heartbreakers preferred to stick to the gritty, raw rock sound the band was known for, Petty was ready to explore something new, especially after his Dave Stewart experience. Rather than force those changes into the Heartbreakers' dynamic, he decided to step outside of it. They finished the entire album without the rest of the band. Working with Jeff Lynne gave Petty the freedom he needed. No band politics, no resistance, just the ability to focus on the music. They worked quickly, playfully, and without friction. It was everything he wasn't feeling during the Heartbreaker sessions at the time. Benmont Tench called up when it was a week past when they were supposed to start working when he got a lot of ums from the engineer. Tench says, "He hemmed and hawed until he finally told me they were making a solo record. The band was not happy when they found out. They were brothers on this journey. Why were they left out? What's happening here?" But Tom's instinct was right on the money. They finished Full Moon Fever in Mike Campbell's garage. Tom's record label, MCA, rejected the album when they first heard it. Irving Azoff originally refused to issue the album, believing it did not contain any hits. Azoff resigned within a few months and, with new label management reviewing the album positively, they decided to release it. Jeff's ability to bring Tom Petty's twang front and center allowed his vivid Americana imagery to shine. Free Fallin' became the anthem that closed out the decade in the most freewheeling way possible, something only Tom Petty could pull off. You could lose your spouse, your dog, and your job all in the same day, and if Free Fallin' came on the radio, you'd somehow know everything was going to be okay.
For breaking her heart. And I'm free.
With I Won't Back Down, Tom Petty handed the world an anthem for anyone who'd been knocked down and dared to get back up. George Harrison provided backing vocals on this track, along with Jeff Lynne. His distinctive harmonies helped give the song its rich, layered sound. Runnin' Down a Dream had the same momentum. Petty's storytelling met Mike Campbell's relentless guitar riff, and suddenly, the road became a place of possibility, much like their own tale. During the sessions, Petty wrote Indiana Girl, an early draft of what would eventually become Mary Jane's Last Dance. Mike Campbell played a central role, but other heartbreakers were mostly absent. Benmont Tench and Howie Epstein were brought in later for certain parts where needed. Instead, Petty pulled in an unexpected cast, friends who would form the Traveling Wilburys with him. Even though Full Moon Fever was a solo record, it didn't feel lonely. It felt liberating. Some of the Heartbreakers felt like they were playing cover songs during the ensuing tour to promote the album. But Tom brought everyone back in the fray on the follow-up album, Into the Great Wide Open, with Jeff Lynne once again the producer. Some bandmates criticized his methods and didn't like it, but it was too bad. This was happening. The album produced hits with the self-titled single, Learning to Fly.
Stood still, and I'm learning to fly, and I ain't got wings.
After the success of Full Moon Fever, Tom's life and music began to shift dramatically. He turned to producer Rick Rubin, known more for hip-hop than rootsy Americana. But Rubin encouraged Petty to strip everything down and speak from the heart. The result was Wildflowers in 1994, a sprawling, deeply personal album that many fans and critics consider one of his finest. The record was raw, tender, and honest, an emotional reset that let Petty show vulnerability like never before. That is when he comes to the realization that he wrote an introspective song rather than another free-spirited anthem when discussing Wildflowers with his therapist, who tells him, "You know that song is about you, right?" His analysis of the statement, "It kind of knocked me back, but he was right. It was me singing too. Me." Behind the scenes, tensions within the Heartbreakers simmered. Drummer Stan Lynch had long clashed with Petty over musical direction and attitude. After years of creative friction and personal disagreements, Petty finally let him go in 1994. It marked the end of an era, but also the start of a more cohesive and emotionally open version of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. He ended his long, troubled marriage in 1996, a relationship that had been strained for years. The changes he was making in his outer world mirrored a deeper change needed within that would lead to an unraveling. He moved into a cabin by himself, and it is there where he says his addiction began. He had been so conditioned to the chaos of life on the road, the instant feedback of thousands of fans, that living in solitude felt like overwhelming sadness. He acknowledged that he wrote the lyrics, "You deserve to be free," about himself, but instead, he developed an addiction which eventually took over his life.
Somewhere you feel free.
As Tom Petty descended into addiction, his relationships, both personal and professional, began to be affected. While working on Echoes, Tom felt Rick Rubin became distracted with other projects, especially the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Petty took it as a personal slight. Things came to a head when Rubin failed to finish mixing Petty's next album. He explains, "Rick left right when we were going to mix. That infuriated me. I changed the production credits to produced by Tom Petty and Mike Campbell with Rick Rubin, which pissed Rick off. but I thought if you don't mix the record, you're not the producer. The betrayal Petty felt cut even deeper when he learned that Rubin had confided in Petty's daughters about his drug use. Petty saw it as a violation of trust, no matter how well-intentioned. Several years later, when a reporter asked Tom Petty, "Do you think you're brutal?" it stops Tom in his tracks. He explains it like this: "I thought for a second and went, yeah. And I thought, brother, I've had to be brutal and it's not effing fun. You misunderstand. There are times when it fell on me to do something and I had to do it to save this that became bigger than all 5 of us, all 6 of us. It's a much more important thing than any one of us now. And if it were to go away, none of us would want to be the guy that ended it." In his 2015 biography, Petty painted a picture of recovery. He described himself as reborn, crediting his second wife with helping him beat the addiction that had drained all the joy from his life. It ended on a note of hard-won peace. But just 2 years after that hopeful ending, Tom Petty was gone. The brutal responsibility he had carried, holding the band together, making records, supporting the livelihoods of those around him, had taken its toll. On October 2nd, 2017, a week after finishing a triumphant 40th anniversary tour with the Heartbreakers, he collapsed at home from an accidental overdose and later died. The autopsy revealed a deadly mix of painkillers, including fentanyl and oxycodone. He'd been performing with a fractured hip, knee problems, and emphysema, pushing through show after show in agony. The same determination that fueled his music now masked the damage being done to his body. What he really needed was healing and rest. But he was stuck in a world that applauds sold-out concerts, not vulnerability, productivity, not peace. He was a man in pain, applauded for carrying on. And just like he said to the reporter, if it were to go away, none of us would want to be the guy that ended it. He carried the weight of the band and all the responsibilities that came with that. All those livelihoods depended on him and the next show. He used chemicals to cope in order to keep the circus going. It dehumanizes you over time. You forget how to just be. The contrast between the book's ending and the reality of his death is stark and heartbreaking. On the outside, Tom Petty had everything: success, a happy marriage, and songs the world adored. But no amount of outward success can repair what remains unresolved within. And in trying to push through it all, Tom Petty unknowingly returned to the very thing he thought he had left behind. A quiet, tragic ending for the man who once sang, "You don't know how it feels to be me."
Let me